Now to a foster care crisis in Oregon, which is leaving some children in the state's care with no place to go. The problem is so bad, state workers say they're now housing children in their own offices, even motels. Fox 12's Caitlin Bolduc shows us why caseworkers say they find themselves in an impossible situation.
At all hours of the night, the Bonham family opens their home to Portland children in need.
For us, over the last 2 years, we have had 35 kids come through our home.
The Bonhams just had a little girl of their own, but are also emergency shelter foster parents. Kids stay with them right after they are taken into state custody until DHS figures out what to do next.
And the majority of those kids have come through late night calls, being removed from their home in some sort of traumatic situation. A police officer or a caseworker drops them at our door, oftentimes in the middle of the night.
Bonham says this year the need is much bigger than she ever imagined.
We transitioned a group of siblings out of our home on Sunday of this week, and on Monday noontime I was getting called to ask to take more children.
DHS tells Fox 12 over the last 2 years, Oregon's foster care system has lost the equivalent of 400 beds in family homes and 100 beds in residential facilities. This while an average of 7,500 children remain in state care.
Things are really hard. Things are really hard at work right now for everybody.
Patty Cooper was a DHS caseworker for 29 years. She retired 2 weeks ago, in part because of the foster placement crisis. A crisis, she says, that came to a head when caseworkers couldn't find anywhere for children to go.
It started with one or two children that didn't have a placement, and they actually stayed in the office. In our office, we have a little health room with a bed. The first night we did it, we all pitched in and bought pizza for the kids, and people really rallied behind being there. And then since then, it's just grown.
Cooper says Washington County caseworkers were totally unprepared for what happened next and made the rules up as they went, housing young children and teens together in motels, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. Cooper says they all took turns watching kids after hours and over weekends. This email sent to Fox 12 from a DHS employee in the Hillsborough office illustrates how desperate one supervisor was to find caseworkers to help.
One weekend there was like conventions in town, so it was hard to find any motel. So we ended up in a motel, I think, over on Evergreen.
When motels got to be too expensive for the state, Cooper says they made the call to house children in their Tigard Visitation Center. And the stress that put on kids sometimes caused problems.
One of the children had just lost control, and she was scaring the other children, and so I ended up taking the other children to the office.
Cooper says she reached a boiling point. So on her last day of work, she wrote this email and sent it out to everyone. In it, she writes, quote, "The problem is there is no stop to what comes in the door. We don't get to say no, and we don't get to have waiting lists, and we keep getting more."
We have to speak out, and I wanted to speak out.
Her intention, she says, was not to bash DHS, but rather to shine a light on the real challenges caseworkers face every day. She believes it's a community problem, and DHS shouldn't shoulder all of the blame.
People have said they posted my email on the wall in their cubicle. I think it meant a lot to people to have somebody speak out.
DHS tells Fox 12, on average, 6 foster children a week statewide spend at least one night in a hotel or child welfare office. Though Cooper tells Fox 12 they've housed that many in Washington County alone. DHS leaders say they're working to find more placement resources along with solutions to the problem. But bottom line, they need more foster parents. People like the Bonhams, who say for them it wasn't a question of how can they help, but how could they not?
What I've learned in my short time is that I have been given a lot more by having these kids in my home.
In Northeast Portland, Caitlin Bolduc, Fox 12 Oregon.